Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's CX Quick Tips. And I'm excited. Okay, so we're going to have a good discussion today with Kate Brouse, and we're going to be talking about something that, if it hasn't affected or impacted you already, by goodness, it will. Kate, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, when I started thinking about the work that we were doing in regards to what I call the agent lifecycle. So when you think about the entire, interviewing and recruiting and onboarding and training and retention models, and you think about that from an agent journey perspective, one of the things that I found quite interesting and compelling when we were doing that virtual event, and this was back in 19, is that there wasn't a whole lot of change that had occurred in regards to agent hiring, but I think remote has changed all that. So when you start thinking about, some of the pitfalls of the traditional models that are associated with hiring remote agents, can you talk about some of the things that you've learned?
Oh, sure. There are so many pitfalls with the previous model. And what we've seen is that, virtual hiring is no longer nice to have, but it's really become a need to have. It's a competitive advantage for those companies who want to hire the top talent. At NTI, what we have discovered is that agents, when they're looking for a job, especially now remote, because a lot of people still want to stay remote, which the pandemic has made possible, they don't want to apply for a job and wait 2 to 3 weeks to hear whether they get it and be onboarded. They want to apply for a job and know within 2 to 3 days that they are starting. And so we've really changed and pivoted at NTI, even though we've focused on the remote hiring environment since 1995. So for 26 years, we have totally pivoted. And instead of doing our traditional, let's have a manager reach out and do a hiring interview type thing, we have gone to doing some AI, using some AI tools and video assessments. And we have found phenomenal success and great candidate experience with that.
Well, as you're talking, I start thinking, and I even saw a string on LinkedIn that somebody was asking the question or doing some survey question about how many interviews do you have to go through in order to be able to, or find a job, or essentially how long was the process for your last job? And some people were saying like 7, 8, 9, 10 interviews, and I don't think a frontline person is going to put up with even three. And I think you confirmed that. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay, so when I start thinking about the common symptoms that you were experiencing, and the reason I say they're common because everybody's probably experiencing them to some degree, but aren't necessarily making some changes and adjustments. They're just kind of dealing with them. What are some of the common symptoms you were finding in regards to the agent hiring process?
Well, the longest thing was just the turnaround time, like you mentioned, was a long time, and you don't want a lot of interviews. And what recent statistics show is that 72 hours after applying for a job, if someone hasn't heard back, 20% of those people are no longer interested in the position that they applied for just 3 days ago because they've gone on and they've found something else that either is a better fit for them or that they heard back immediately, a yes or a no. And that's really what is important, is that agents want to hear yes and they want to hear no. If it's a no, that means they can open up their experiences and search to a wider area. And the interesting thing that plays out is that companies who quickly provide the answer of no, but thank you, are likely to see that talent come back to them in the future because candidates really appreciate the fact that they got a response. I mean, anyone who's been in the job force for a number of years knows that it's really common to, send your resume out there or apply online and never hear back anything. But with the new automated tools and AI, it's really easy to make sure that every single person who applies is given the chance to understand that, yes, we received your application. Yes, it's being reviewed. And yes, thank you, move forward, or no, thank you, come back later.
Well, I also think it's kind of naive from an organizational perspective to think that people are just holding out for us, right? I
Right.
think top talent is getting more than one offer, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And that's really it. And that's what we've seen at NTI. And because we want to be able to attract top talent, and because we specifically serve people within the disability community, we recognize that if we aren't getting them and sourcing them, they absolutely are going elsewhere, which is why we changed our hiring methods.
Well, and I would dare to say that, with some of the recent changes, if I was to think about who your typical candidate is for NTI, that they've, as a group, also become in higher demand because organizations are starting to pay attention to it. So you also have kind of raised the awareness on that, but it's kind of been a self-defeating or
Yes.
self-challenging prophecy, hasn't it?
It absolutely has, Jim. And it's a good thing because we want to move the needle on disability employment. So even though now other companies are competing for the same candidates that we are, we're happy about that.
Well, and I also have just recently witnessed, a couple of organizations that were now starting to, promote solutions associated with overall, internet accessibility and use for people that are, disabled, whether it's, sight or hearing impaired. And I think for us, the whole inclusiveness arena has gone well beyond, what we're seeing from a race, gender, and all of that perspective. And which to me, I think that that movement overall is something that could benefit every organization.
Absolutely, it can. And the thing that I like about some of the new hiring tools and video assessments that are out there is that they are inclusive and that they don't screen for the school that you attended. They screen for the skills that you have. And for companies that want to be inclusive and have good diversity, they can use the information that they receive from those skills assessments to hire the right people and then to also know what additional training is needed after hire. And so the tools that are available out there really provide an end-to-end great user experience from the time someone applies for a job till the time they get the job. Immediately, the hiring managers can say, okay, this person is great on all of these skills, but could use a brush up on this other.
You bring up a really interesting point, and I think for all of us, we kind of look for something that's incongruent or incongruence. And what I mean is, if I am as an organization or as a company that's looking to hire people, I am talking about employee experience, employee engagement, but yet I'm not delivering on that in regards to that new hire journey wherever it is. They start questioning whether or not they can trust us.
They do, absolutely. And the thing that's so interesting is that so many of the companies out there hiring are the companies they're hiring their customers. And if you turn somebody away as part of the job application process because they didn't feel like it was fair or inclusive, or they didn't get an answer or a response, you're now potentially turning a customer away, not just a candidate. But when you make that process inclusive, even if what it is just thank you, you aren't qualified for this position, you're still retaining those people as customers for you. And that's really important to recognize.
Most definitely. I mean, we don't want to, create an issue at the very beginning, right? Okay, so when you start talking about KPIs and key performance metrics associated with the entire hiring process, there's several that people may look at. Like offer and acceptance percentage. They start looking at retention rates within the first either 30, 60, or 90 days. There's a lot of different KPIs that organizations look at. So if you start thinking about where you were making some of these changements and adjustments, what are some of the key KPIs that actually have had impact and change for you?
It's really interesting because overall, and right now I'm talking about not necessarily specifically at NTI, because again, we serve the disability community, and so we specifically are looking for people who might get turned away from other jobs so that we can help them train themselves and get the jobs that we have available. But overall, the research shows that the KPIs specifically of people who stay on the job longer, because the AI that exists and the ability of AI to predict who is going to be good at the job is phenomenal. There is so much data there. So at any individual organization, it doesn't matter whether you have 50 employees or 500,000 employees, you don't have the data that some of these applications and tools do that can pull from millions of pieces of data to apply to each individual person to figure out whether that's going to be a job fit. So for somebody who's in talent acquisition and is using these tools, the AI will tell you this person is a good fit. or this person isn't a good fit. And those are great. And the thing that is wonderful about that is that inherent bias is a thing. And we realize that as people are programming these tools, sometimes the inherent bias was built into it. And now that that is something that is on the radar, companies who provide these kind of solutions are working to combat that. And so it's becoming ever more inclusive, which is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sometimes we have to take the human out of the hiring process, and that
Yes,
means the one who's a part of the decision making, right? It's just the way that it works. Kate
it's
Brouse,
crazy.
wealth of information. Now, if if you could please share with the listeners and watchers, how could they can get in touch with you and maybe even learn more about some of the things that you're doing from a tools perspective and a practices perspective at NTI.
Oh, of course. The best way to get in touch is probably on LinkedIn, me directly, Kate Brouse, or if you feel like you want to email me, my email address is kbrouse@nticentral.org. And I would be happy to connect you with any of my coworkers who are experts at the different tools that we use and on remote hiring and all of those things rolled into one.
Kate Brouse, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thanks, Jim.
Of course,